mic check 1212. It's the Y2K collector, and I'm noticing something nefarious about Goodwill, GameStop, and any other like secondhand or thrift store where you're able to go and buy pre-owned games. And what I'm noticing is that the employees are starting to recognize and kind of gatekeep uh, when it comes to some of the rare games that they get into their stores. Now, there's not really much that I can say about that because obviously, if you have access to cheap games and you have it within your power to take first dibs on those games, I can't knock a person for doing that, right? If you have an opportunity, take advantage of it, right? We live in a capitalistic society. So, any advantage that you can get, by all means, go ahead and take it. But what I've noticed over the past couple weeks, especially with the amount of games that I've been able to find, not only at GameStop, but also at my local thrift store, and then also what I'm seeing on like Goodwill's website, a lot of what we're seeing is two things. One, prices are going up in general. So at first, it was a situation where, eBay, Mercari, the online websites were the places where the prices were increasing first. But what I'm starting to see is that a lot of retailers are catching up to eBay quickly. And I think they're all starting to do what most game store owners do, which is as soon as they get their games in, they're not marking them down or pricing them at a flat rate. There was a time where if a stack of games went into a thrift store, if what the game charged for video games was $5, then regardless of the game, they would slap a $5 price tag on every single game. What's happening now is that thrift stores like Goodwill and even GameStop, they're having their employees actually research every game that comes in so that they can somewhat price match those games to whatever the going market rate is. And you're seeing this reflected in a lot of places. I recently went to my local thrift store the other day where I was able to snag up some really good deals on some GameCube games. However, I did notice something. 2, 3 years ago in that store, every game, regardless of if it was a Dreamcast game, a PlayStation game, a PS2 game, PS4 game, every game was a flat $5. Every game, no matter what it was. Over the last few years, I've noticed that the prices have steadily increased on certain games. So, for instance, there were a lot of GameCube games there, but like SpongeBob on the GameCube was $5, but then they priced like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 at $15. And then they priced, Kirby's Air Ride at $25. And then they priced Pokemon Coliseum at like 75 and $80. So while they're still giving a significant discount off of the market price of the game, they're still pricing them up, right? So if you think about it from a thrift store perspective, I mean, imagine not being into video games, right? And walking into a thrift store thinking you'll be able to get a GameCube game for $5 or $10, but you see an $80 price tag on a GameCube game. You would be kind of thrown off, right? Because you'd be like, well, wow, like, why is this game so expensive here? Well, it's because a lot of store employees and a lot of stores have caught on to the wave. And again, I can't blame them. I'm not mad at this. I mean, we live in a capitalistic society, like I've said before, and get your money, right? If you have the ability to price a game and you have, claim over the game, do what you're going to do. But what that does is it does put a strain, right, on resellers, right? It makes it more difficult for them to profit. And I think what they're trying to do is find a healthy balance between making the games too expensive for it to be worth anything to a reseller, but they're also trying to make it cheap enough to where someone who doesn't know anything about games, it would still be interested in purchasing the game. And that's a difficult balance for like a Goodwill or any other thrift store. When it comes to GameStop, I think GameStop is just trying to do the same thing. While they may not necessarily be trying to do a dollar for dollar price match with like an eBay or Mercari, GameStop as well is increasing prices on games that they know are going to be more valuable. Now, there's a catch 22 with this though, right? Because just because a game is expensive doesn't mean it's highly sought after. And I think this is going to be an issue that like a GameStop, probably more so than a thrift store, will run into. What do I mean? Um, for instance, there's a GameStop that I frequent, from time to time. It's a little bit of ways from me, but in this GameStop, they have a copy of Tomba sitting on the shelf in that GameStop. That copy of Tomba has been sitting there all summer long. No one's buying it because they priced it at $84 and it's disc only, right? So in GameStop's, I guess, inventory list, they're pricing Tomba at 85 bucks because Tomba at one point was a $200 PS1 game when it was complete in box. I don't think it goes for that much right now. It's probably somewhere around 130, if that, maybe 140. But no one's really going to pay that price for a Tomba, even a collector and even a reseller. A collector is definitely not going to pay 85 for a copy of Tomba, but that's because it doesn't have the case or the manual. And a reseller is not going to pay that much because the profit margins won't be there. And ultimately, Tomba is not a game that's really sought after like that. Primarily because you have limited run doing their re-release of the Tomba series. And I just don't think at this stage in gaming, Tomba has the same impact that it did before. There are a lot of games that kind of mimic what you see in Tomba, and there are a lot of games that have done Tomba better. I think Tomba is definitely much more of a nostalgia play, and I don't think that there are a lot of games that kind of have that nostalgic grip on collectors today, as say like a Tomba doesn't have the same type of grip as like a Mario 64 or like another game from that era. There are tons of games on the PlayStation 1 that may not be fun to play, but I think they're still cult classics and will still demand a pretty dollar, or a top dollar. You think about games like Silent Hill. May not be the most fun game to play or best game to look at, but that's still something that's sought after because people might want to complete that series or collect for that series. So I just think that it's really going to depend on the game. And I think if GameStop and like Goodwill and other thrift stores try to use price charting as the measuring stick of how they're going to price their games, they might be in for a rude awakening because you have a lot of really high priced games that will just sit on a shelf because the demand just isn't there. A Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, that might fly off the shelf because people really enjoy that game. You got a lot of RPG lovers out there, and you got a lot of people that might want to get that and play that. On the flip side, you might have I don't know, I'm just trying to think of a game that's expensive that no one really cares about. There's so many out there, right? But I think ultimately, this fluctuation in pricing and this price matching that we're seeing at a retail level is going to kind of slow things down. It's already slowed things down a lot. And trust me, things have slowed down a ton. I mean, a lot of you will probably remember, like, I think 5 years from now, we're going to look back on retro gaming in like 2020, 2021, 2022. And those will really be like the glory days for resellers when it seemed like the prices of games were never going to go down. They were just shooting up. We're going to remember some of the iconic videos like Carl Jobst's video about WADA games and heritage auctions. We're going to remember, the Phoenix resales of the world. And we're going to look back at this time in YouTube gaming and retro gaming, and we're going to remember like how this era changed the perception of retro gaming value. And it's funny because I was scrolling through YouTube the other day and I happened to like scroll past that video that Carl Jobst did about heritage auctions and WADA. And I remember specifically where I was when that video dropped. I was actually with my family. I took my family to Waikiki, and we were driving to Pearl Harbor. and, the family was in the back. They were all falling asleep as I was making my way through Oahu. And I was like, man, let me just watch a YouTube video to keep myself awake. Because, we had spent the first half of the day at the beach, Waikiki Beach, and now we were going to spend like the afternoon in Pearl Harbor. And I remember that video dropped, and I was watching that video, and it's just crazy, just how much has changed. And now we're starting to see like a stabilization of prices. We're starting to see price matching at a retail level, and I don't know what it's going to do to gaming. To be honest, I think like prices will stay high. I do believe that there is a new baseline for retro video games. I do believe that the floor has risen over the past 4 years, and I don't think we're ever going to see things drop down to like 2011, 2010 levels. I think what's going to happen next is, should there be another economic event that creates mass inflation, I think we're just going to see prices inflate even higher, especially on games that were already rare and already valuable. I think cheap games are always going to be cheap. I think common games are always going to be common, but the rare stuff, the stuff that people want, the stuff that's highly collectible, I think that stuff is always going to have the biggest opportunity to rise in value. Now, all that being said, here comes the nefarious part. The folks who have the easiest access to that stuff, which is going to be your thrift store employees, your GameStop employees, they've all caught on to this too. And I think what's happening is that the really, really good stuff isn't even making its way to the sales floor. That's just my opinion. I think a lot of the stuff that people really want is not even making its way to where just the average consumer can purchase it, because most employees are either backdooring it to their friends, they're taking it home for themselves, they're doing what they got to do to get their hands on it. So if there's a thrift store and they get, a box of SNES games with like Earthbound and Metal Warriors and, uh, you name it, R-Type 3 and Chrono Trigger, if they have someone back there pricing those games to put them on the floor, you don't think that as that employee is pricing those games, they're going to set aside the more valuable ones? Of course they are. They're going to take them for themselves. And that's typically what happens, especially when folks have these massive trade-ins. So for me, like just like looking at going towards the end of the year, I know that if I'm going to be able to buy games at a significant discount, like 50%, 40% off, even 60% off, I'm going to have to start looking at buying entire collections and then selling what I don't want and keeping what I do want. That's the only way it's going to work. If you're trying to like acquire the rare good stuff, you're going to have to buy the collections and then keep what you want and sell what you don't want, because the gatekeeping is going to continue to rise and the cherry picking is going to come at an all-time high. And I think we're going to start to see it as we get further into the year. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you're seeing out there. These are just some thoughts that I had. I could be wrong, and this could just be something that I'm seeing in my area, but you let me know. It's the Y2K Collector. I'll be dropping a video tomorrow, one of my more formal edited ones. I'll be dropping a vlog series. I may expound on this a bit more, but I'm interested to know what you all think. Hope you're having a good weekend, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.